Demand and population growth has been decoupling over the past few decades. What we see is as technological advancement is happening, as communities facing different water stressors, from droughts to flooding to infrastructure disruptions, they start using less and less water. And that means that even though population in many parts of the developed world has grown significantly, their demand has not been increasing. People have become a lot more efficient in the way they use water and how they use water. Think about the dishwashers and washing machines we have in our homes. The new generation of all of those are using a lot less water than they did 20, 30 years ago. So water demand has been precipitously dropping and actually stabilizing over the years despite population growth. The question is, if demand is not driven by population growth, are there other things that are impacting water demand? And how does that going to dictate how much water supply do we need in the future? That's where the concept of demand management come into play, and how utilities, instead of, as they're thinking about water reliability, how they can switch from perpetual search for more water supplies, they can focus on changing the baseline on demand and reducing demand in different ways. While we think about water reuse and recycling as a water supply augmentation strategy, the reality is reuse and recycling at a smaller scale, at a home scale, at a building scale, at a neighborhood scale, can actually reduce demand and reduce our baseline demand, therefore changing the fundamentals of water supply reliability. As utilities are trying to build more water reliability by focusing on supply side management rather than demand side management, they may actually end up focusing more on building large centralized infrastructure rather than focusing on smaller solutions that can enhance their water reliability and actually create more water for them as a whole. For example, they might not be as motivated to do leak management or think about reuse at every scale, or trying to actually reduce baseline demand by implementing different strategies. Because ultimately, their business model is focused on building reliability by focusing on the supply side of the equation. However, demand side management is not only the cheapest and most economic way of building water reliability, it can actually be one of the most environmentally friendly approach to build water sustainability in the long run. The key here to build a more resilient and reliable water future for utilities is to realize demand is much more elastic than they imagined. It's impacted by more than just economics, demographics, and climate. Demand can be changed as people use water in different ways in their homes. Reusing at different scale in a home can change water demand in many ways. For example, we use about 30% of our water in our bathrooms to shower and wash our hands. That water is perfectly fit by very little treatment to be used for toilet flushing, which does not require high quality drinkable water. So that 30%, if we redirect our shower water and bathroom water and use it for our toilet flushing, all of a sudden our water use can reduce by 30%. Now, the utilities can face a lot of challenges as people kind of transition to these distributed solutions. For example, as we do more leak management, demand reduction, reuse and recycling at every scale, that means the amount of water that moves in our pipes and the way we distribute water can be impacted significantly, which means then we need to use data and information technology to track how much water people are generating. What does that mean? How does that impact the amount of water they take out of our centralized system? How much generation they do at different times of the day, at different times of the year? And what does that mean as we are thinking about reliability? Do we need to have sort of a on-demand storage somewhere in a local community that can augment potentially some of the demand some of these communities have at different times of the day? This is very, very similar to what we experienced in the energy sector. As you're thinking about solar panels on people's roofs or storage spaces in the home of batteries in homes and neighborhoods, in a way you're trying to create a system that can function at every scale and while creating reliability. At the same time, making sure that your centralized infrastructure is up to speed and healthy and can still deliver certain level of water supplies to these communities. So as we introduce distributed water solutions at every scale, as we think about demand side management as a strategy for the utilities of the future, we are going to build these hybrid water supply systems and water infrastructure model that requires a totally different mindset as we think about its management and operation. We need to know when, where, and how much water is generated, is needed, and how it needs to be delivered. So a smart grid that can track distributed production and consumption patterns is key as part of this process. The question becomes, what kind of infrastructure do we need to invest in? Is it going to be hard gray infrastructure, centralized infrastructure, or are we going to work with people at different scales to incorporate solutions in their homes and in their neighborhoods and in their communities? And do we need to invest more in soft solutions, soft infrastructure such as data, information technology, and decision support tools, rather than just thinking about large centralized infrastructure? Ultimately, this is going to impact the business model of the utilities. Utilities of the future is going to be a lot more circular, data-driven, and customer-focused. They are going to be able to manage this hybrid system in a most effective way.
Katie,